Okay. Allison, I just sent you 2 emails and I split them up because it said I had too much to send out.
Okay,
So if you don't get them, let me know.
I will.
And I have a feeling it's probably the applicant testimony that I'm having an issue with, but anyway.
We can figure
Okay.
it out.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, I think we're at the date, time, and place for our hearing. Is there anything procedural anyone needs to discuss? I accidentally put one of the exhibits into the chat. I don't know how to remove it. But if you see that in the chat, that is one of the what I believe to be the applicant tentative exhibits. It's the suggestion of death. Okay, well, I think if we're ready, as people may have seen on the screen, just to let you know, we are on YouTube at this point. So with that, good morning. My name's Elizabeth Hurst. I am the designated hearing examiner in today's case 19-00041-UT. This is in the matter of the application of Henry G. Coors and Jory Janiczynski to transfer 100% of the issued and outstanding stock in South Hills Water Company from Henry G. Coors to Jory Janiczynski. And today is the date, time, and place for the hearing in this matter. If anyone needs anything to do with the transcript, they need to see our court reporter, Allison Hoyman. And we, as I indicated off the record, again, this is being live streamed on YouTube. We are going to go ahead and make our appearances for the record. So if you would just give your name and address, Ms. Janiczynski.
It's Jory Janiczynski, and the company address is 5605 Don Lorenzo Drive in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87121.
Thank you. And Mr. Borman?
Thank you. My name is Bradford Borman, appearing on behalf of Utility Division staff. Do you need my address?
No.
Okay.
I think I know your address. If you'd like to introduce your witnesses.
Thank you. I am joined by staff witnesses Gabriela Daschino and Tim Martinez.
Very well. And just let me note for the record that Ms. Janiczynski, you also have appearing at the hearing a expert who's been assisting you, Elizabeth Johns. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Very well. I think that's taking care of that. And I would like to note for the record that initially this case, which has been going on for a while, there was a public notice pursuant to my first procedural order issued in the Albuquerque Journal. And there was an individual notice sent to all the customers of South Hills Water Company by Ms. Janiczynski, again pursuant to that original hearing date. Since that proposed time, just to set the record, there have been a number of filings a particular pleading that I wanted to reference, and that was a notice to withdraw that was filed back in 2019. And Ms. Judichinsky, am I correct that you are no longer pursuing the notice to withdraw?
Correct. I'm not purchasing the company.
The believe that initially and I am referring to this is filed on June 20th of 2019. It was entitled a motion to withdraw application. You're no longer pursuing that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And staff filed several responses and I think a reply. Mr. Borman, staff, what's staff's opinion on whether or not that particular motion to withdraw needs to be addressed or does not need to be addressed?
Well, I think, to the extent that Jory has identified that she's not pursuing the relief requested in that, I mean, staff would be okay with withdrawing it or denying it. I mean, as I think we all recognize that the positions of the parties have somewhat evolved throughout this case. Right now, staff views this application as should be approved. And, I believe Ms. Gnachinsky is the same place as that. So that's what we are trying to pursue at this point.
Very well. One of the other procedural issues that occurred right around the same time, as evidenced by a filing by you, and for the record, my pronunciation of the applicant's name, Ms. Gnachinsky, has graciously offered to let us refer to her by her first name to ease our potential stress with trying to pronounce her name correctly. And so, as you just heard Mr. Borman refer to Jory, he's referring to the applicant. So let me reference the other document that I want information placed in the record about, and that was filed July 25th of 2019. And that was filed by you, Ms. Gnachinsky, and it is referred to as a suggestion of death. You filed that document, correct?
That is correct.
And my understanding of that document is that your co-applicant Okay, let me pull this up. Okay, and I think you can see that. Can you see that, Ms. Januszynski?
I can.
Okay, yeah, and that's a document you follow. It's referred to as a suggestion of death. And you are basically informing the commission that your co-applicant, Henry G. Coors, died on or about July 3rd, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And think for record purposes, Ms. Januszynski, I'd like to refer to that. Would you like that to be applicant's exhibit A or 1?
That would be fine.
Which one?
1 is fine.
Okay, all right, so the information contained in that document is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
That is correct.
Okay. Any objection to the introduction of applicant exhibit 1, the suggestion of death? Mr. Borman?
Staff does not object to admission of that document or its labeling.
Okay. So Mr. Coors passed away, and at that point, I had issued, pursuant to the second procedural order in this case, a number of requests, that we refer to them as bench requests, information that I wanted to answers to. And in response to that, you did another filing, correct, Ms. Januszynski?
That is correct.
Okay, and can you see that? I've got that up on the screen now.
Yes, I can.
Okay, and it's called a notice of filing, and it was filed August 29th of 2019.
Correct.
Okay, and you filed that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and that particular notice of filing, as it indicates, included various documents that had been requested by me. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. It indicates in 1 and 2 are quitclaim deeds. 3 is a letter from the state engineer. 4 is our stock certificates. 5 was actions by the sole director of South Hills, and another one in item 6. Item 7 was an action of the sole shareholder in lieu of a special meeting. 8 were the statement of registration in July of 2019, and an affidavit by you, and then finally information regarding Isaac Hernandez certifications. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Hernandez is your,
He's
or
my-
what?
He still is my certified operator.
Okay, very well. And you prepared this, and it's true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
That is correct.
And are you in agreement that this should be labeled as applicant exhibit 2?
That is correct.
Mr. Borman, any objection to applicant exhibit 2, which is entitled a notice of filing filed by Ms. Janichinski in response to documents requested or relating to bench requests from the second procedural order?
Staff has no objection.
Very well. And then we have your testimony, Ms. Janichinski.
Yes, ma'am.
And you filed prepared direct testimony on March 7th. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you prepared that, or it was prepared at your direction and control?
It was prepared under my direction and control.
And is it true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
And do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to that particular document?
I do not.
Did that document contain your advice notices?
Yes.
Okay. And just so the record's clear, you filed advice notices because South Hills provides water and sewer service, correct?
Yes.
And so one advice notice was for the water company and one advice notice was from the sewer company.
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Borman, is there any objection to the applicant's exhibit 3, her testimony, that her direct testimony filed in this case?
Staff does not object to applicant exhibit 3.
Okay. All right, the fourth exhibit, potentially, Ms. Janichinski, is entitled Replacement Advice Notice number 20. And I believe it also includes replacement advice notice number 9. Yes. And those were filed with the commission March 7th. Are you familiar with the replacement advice notices, Ms. Janichinski?
Yes, ma'am.
And the reason for the necessity of replacement advice notices had to do with your signatures on those advice notices, is that correct?
It did. And the separation of the water and sewer.
So then so the record's clear, if the replacement advice notices are the true and accurate representations of the water and sewer functions of South Hills, correct?
That is correct.
And they are complete with your signatures, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so then they would in fact supersede the advice notices attached to applicant Exhibit 3, your testimony, correct?
Yes,
Any objection? You want to include these in the record, correct, Ms. Janichinski?
yes,
Okay. Mr. Borman, any objection to the introduction of applicant Exhibit 4, the replacement advice notices 20 and 9?
Staff has no objection.
Okay. So also, so that the record is complete, and I'll take administrative notice of the commission's order suspending advice notice that was filed March 30th. That basically suspends these advice notice until there is a decision in these case. Otherwise, they would have gone into effect within 30 days. Okay, very well. Ms. Janichinski, do you have any other documents at this point that you would like to include in the record?
I do not.
And then can you just give the commission a brief overview of your responsibilities previously with the company, and now that this case is about transferring the stock to you, and Mr. Coors is gone now, can you just give the commission an overview of your relationship with South Hills Water Company?
Certainly. I lived within the district that South Hills Water Company served for well over 20 years. Mr. Coors was looking for someone to help with the banking, the accepting of payments, the billing, and so forth that lived in the community. As his previous bookkeeper lived across town and was retiring due to poor health. And I met with him several times and accepted the position to help him. And it evolved from there. As his health declined, he was looking aggressively for someone to purchase the company. And that was not going how he
Hold on just a second, Ms. Janichinski. I'm really sorry. Allison, we didn't swear the witness.
And given the different nature of examination, I didn't speak up. I can do it now.
Very well.
I'm sorry to laugh. I apologize.
Ma'am, would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And have previously given.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So we can make that retroactive.
Sure.
Any objection to that, Mr. Borman?
I certainly do not.
Okay. I guess I was so gung ho to get the exhibits admitted that
You were doing a great job. It was going very smoothly.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll try to get over that bump. Okay. So now that you're under oath, go ahead and continue, Ms. Janichinski, that you started out as the bookkeeper, and as Mr. Coors health failed,
Yes, he was looking aggressively for someone to purchase the company. Things did not go how he had planned. And as his health declined, I took it upon myself to help with more and more things.
Now, specifically, what kind of things? Were you more than a bookkeeper?
Yes, I ended up being the point of contact for all of the system upgrades that he was doing, including the radio read meters, that huge project, and then upgrading the software and the computer system from Green Books to a Sequoia software program designed for water companies to do more accurate billing. I then started participating in what was known as Collection Saturday, and that was knocking on people's doors that were behind on their payments, trying to collect or set up a payment arrangement, or locking their service off. And I was able to help convince Mr. Coors that if we worked with them a little bit, we would collect more money. And so over time, that just became under me also. When he realized his health was declining even further, is when we started in 2019, the beginning of the year. He wanted to explore some different avenues of my purchasing the company. Those did not come to fruition. And unfortunately, shortly thereafter, he did pass away. And
What's been happening since he?
I jumped in with both feet and I just kept things running. If I didn't know, I tried to find somebody who did know. And that's when I was introduced to Mr. Martinez and Ms. Deschno. They very kindly came from Santa Fe down to my home and provided an immense amount of relief and support to me. And I learned that where I was headed, for the most part, was in the right direction. But of course, there were going to be lots of bumps along the way. I learned that the late Henry Coors did not always follow Public Utility Act or PRC direction. And while I'm not responsible for what he did, I did accept the responsibility to make sure that it is fixed to the best of my ability, and that we run the best small water company that we can. And I believe I have excelled at that in many different places, but to me, most importantly, is the customer service aspect. That was not a strong suit of the late Henry Coors by any means. And my most recent example of that was last night. We had a customer doing yard work, broke a line, tried turning their water off themselves, broke the setter. So we had a gush going on. We were able to get that completed and fixed within 2 hours. But in the meantime, I had 200 customers calling, texting, trying to find out why their water was either off or at a very slow trickle. And even my most difficult of difficult customers thanked me and the efforts of my staff for being so prompt. When his water was restored, he called me again and wanted to make sure I did tell his staff how much he appreciated us. And it was just a matter of some soft, quiet talking. thanking them for their time and their call to me to let me know that there was an issue. And nobody got riled up. Nobody got upset. A very different response than what would have happened in the past. The late Henry Court did not interact or support his customers in a very positive way, leaving a lot of negative feeling. It took a very long time and a lot of hard work to turn that around. But today, I believe all of my residents feel confident and secure in the services that we provide, and are thankful that we're still South Hills Water Company today.
Ms. Juniczynski, if you hadn't continued carrying on with the duties that you had prior to Mr. Coors' passing, what do you think would happen to the water company?
I was afraid to find out, and I didn't know. I knew that his children were not at all interested. They wanted nothing to do with it. Even at his final services, they didn't even want the name South Hills Water brought up. It was like that part of his life did not exist to them. His wife did not want anything to do with running of the company. They just were grateful that it wasn't going to be part of them anymore. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew these 200 homes needed to be taken care of. And I was going to do the best that I could do, at least temporary, to make sure that it happened. And it's kind of evolved from there. And the more I learned that needed to be changed and fixed, I realized that I could not work a full-time job and this very full-time job. And I've changed my life to make this my sole focus. I am not working outside of the company now because there's more than enough here to keep me running and busy.
Okay. Anything else that you would like to know, the commission to know about your transition or your from employee to owner and full-time operator? I know you're not the water operator, but you're the president of the company.
Certainly.
Anything else that's not you haven't already said or isn't included in your testimony?
No, thank you.
Okay. So that sets the stage, and I'll let you ask any questions here in a minute, Mr. Borman, that you may have. Again, I just want to include for the record at this point sort of a demarcation point in the proceedings. After Mr. Coors passed away and Ms. Joy has provided testimony about how she took over the company, as far as the commission filings which have been referenced. I also wanted to indicate for the record that I believe it was around that point in time that staff filed a document which I'll take administrative notice of on August 15th of 2019. Staff filed their August 15th, 2019 status report, and basically contained within that particular status report, it indicates a staff meeting with Ms. Janichinski, staff actually going to the location and having a discussion and viewing the South Hills water system at that particular time, and information being exchanged with Ms. Janichinski, and that staff had identified several areas for Ms. Janichinski with regard to rates, rules, and forms, and that there were some issues that were going to have to be addressed. Subsequent to that particular status conference, I will note for the record that I have 10 orders with regard to status conferences through the rest of 19, the year 2020, and then also in 2021, that there was an ongoing review of the case and ongoing communications between staff and Ms. Janichinski, and that due to the pandemic and some health issues that were going on, resulted in delays. But again, there were status conferences and reviews that continued to go on, culminating in a status conference at the end of January this year, and then shortly after a schedule set for testimony and in a hearing in this case. So with that explanation of filings, orders, and historical procedural events, Mr. Borman, do you have any questions for Ms. Janichinski for her direct testimony, any of her other exhibits, or her oral testimony here today?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Really briefly, I just want to get some clarification, if I may. Ms. Janichinski, I'm not sure I quite caught when you took over responsibility for operations of South Hills Water Company. Could you tell us?
Complete control was when he passed away July 3rd.
Of 2019.
Of 2019. Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and you say complete control. You had some operational authority prior to that day?
I did.
When did you begin that prior authority?
I want to say by the first part of May, his health had declined enough that he just wasn't capable of doing what needed to be done, and he directed me on whatever task he needed done for me to do, and it just progressed.
Okay. Is it fair to say then that you've had at least some operational authority with regards to South Hills Water Company for nearly 3 years now?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
I have a few questions for you. Ms. Janichinski. According to the documents filed in this case, Mr. Coors transferred the 1,000 shares of stock to you, correct?
Yes, it was payable upon, or transferable upon death.
Okay. But you didn't have an agreement to pay for that stock, correct?
That is correct.
And has anyone else claimed any ownership interest during the time that you took over the company?
No, not at all.
And you indicated in your oral testimony today that none of Mr. Coors' relatives indicated any interest in running the company or asserted any ownership interest in the company, correct?
That is correct. They thanked me.
However, you did include in your testimony at Exhibit G a promissory note, an installment promissory note. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And that particular installment promissory note is unsigned, isn't it?
That is correct.
And can you explain that for the record?
It was my understanding that a loan that the late Henry Coors took out at the bank needed to be cleared prior to him selling the company, and his wife, Zoanne Cognan Coors, had the financial ability to pay off that loan and come up with this agreement that she would be paid back the money in $2,000 installments. I did not see any of this documentation until after he passed. And this is what I found. And I asked Mrs. Coors about it. I said, where is the signed copy, a dated copy, the bank information? And she said that as far as she knew, the late Henry Coors had not signed this. And if he did, she did not have a copy of it, but it was an agreement that they made, and she felt needed to be played out. I did know of the agreement to some extent from the late Henry Coors. I felt at that time it was the right thing to do to continue to pay her, as I had been told that she had entered into this agreement with him, and there are attached to this the first couple of checks that he had cut her with the payment. So I did not feel that there was any that this wasn't something she just came up with, that this was in fact a debt that the company owed to her.
So to the best of your knowledge, there is no signed installment promissory note.
That is correct.
Okay. And there's writing on the side of this document that says now 6%. Do you know who wrote that on there?
I did. I'm sorry. She, after the first year, told me to bring it from 7% down to 6%. And so that's what I did.
Okay. And can you update the status of this agreement?
Yes, there's approximately $7,400 left of the agreement. She does know that we're going through this process right now, and the recommendation may not be that I continue to pay these installments to her, and that she was fine with me putting them on hold until a final decision was made. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay, so then basically you have stopped paying the payments.
That is correct, as of the first of the year.
And why did you do that?
Because that's when we were starting to meet, and
We who?
I'm sorry, Mr. Borman, Mr. Martinez, Ms. Deschanel, and yourself. And the question was raised if this was actually a legal document, because it was not signed and dated, and perhaps I did not make the best choice in paying it back. And at the time that I came, was taking things over, I was still learning the role of the PRC, and because the only thing I had ever been told was from the late Henry Coors, and his vision and understanding and belief of the PRC was much different than what others see it to be and know it is.
Okay, and so 7,000 left on that agreement. So then basically the what, you've paid about 56,000 on that?
Yes, it started out at 63,000.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell me about this? Well, let me ask you this. Did you read Mr. Martinez's testimony?
I did.
And you see where he has indicated that that his recommendation is that because this was not properly presented to the commission, that it shouldn't be paid.
That is my understanding from what his recommendations were.
Right. And based upon what he has recommended, is your opinion changed from what you know and what you've testified to, as to whether or not you think that the remainder should be paid, or do you agree with them that since the proper procedure was not followed, to get approval here with the commission, that the remainder should not be paid.
I am very much, I can see both sides. And I'm hoping for direction from Mr. Borman and staff as to how I should proceed.
Well, the staff has given you their opinion. So ultimately, it will be the commission who lets you know about this. But I'm just, so your opinion has not changed that this was an enforceable agreement against the company.
Well, I don't know the legalities of it. For me, it wasn't signed or dated. And at the time that I came in, I did not know that this needed to go to in front of everybody with the PRC. I was very green to the whole process. Now I know different. And there was also some question of dollar amounts not matching up for what he had presented to the PRC. So there were a lot of gray areas that have been brought forward now.
Okay. Additionally, before I forget, I want to ask you, you went ahead and filed an annual report for the company in 2020. Is that correct?
Well, I attempted. I'm actually working with Elizabeth Johns. And now that we have the water and sewer rates, rules, and forms separated, we are going to go back and correctly do all of the annual reports. And that is the next thing that we're going to accomplish. But that really needed to be done in order to properly do the annual reports, because the late Henry Coors had everything all in one, which really kind of masked the company as two entities.
Okay, and so you attempted to file the annual report for 2019.
Yes.
And you're going to, you did or did not file a annual report for 2020?
We did not.
Or for 2021?
No. And they
Okay.
will both, that's what we're going to work on now that we have the two entities separated.
Okay. When do you think that's going to happen?
I'm hoping we're starting on it tomorrow. We
Okay.
had to prepare for today and make sure that we were ready. And that is our very next task.
Okay. One of the other recommendations that Mr. Martinez for staff made in his testimony had to do with another contractual agreement that you entered into, correct?
Yes.
And that is Exhibit 8H to your testimony, correct?
It's H or I. That's it.
Okay. And this is entitled Contract Between South Hills Water Company and Louis Roca Rothgerber Christie LLP for payment and percentage of proceeds. And it looks like that this is an agreement between South Hills and Mr. Coors to pay 54% or $54,000 to this law firm. Is that correct?
It was my understanding he had to pay that. And it was my understanding that he did, and that of the $355,000 he still owed them, that 20% of proceeds when he sold the company would go to them. And that was a payment arrangement that they had made. I knew nothing of that. I was approached by Mr. Michael Duggar, who works for the law firm, that this was payable and due. I explained to him I did not purchase the company. And
Okay, so now we're getting into Exhibit I, correct?
yes,
Which is an agreement and release between that same law firm
mhm,
and South Hills, correct?
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And they told me that I owed this money, and I was blindsided by it. And I said I didn't know anything about it. I said I did not purchase the company. I've taken over running it. And they said, well, that is a sale of the company. It's a different owner, therefore it is a sale of the company. And I said, well, what do we do? Because I do not have those funds, nor does the company have those funds. We're a very small company. And Mr. Michael Duggar said, well, let me go talk to the board and see what we can come up with, and I'll be in touch with you. And he came back and asked for $1,500 a month until $50,000 was paid. And I told him I was unable to do that. I refused to sign or agree to something I knew that the company could not support during our slowest financial months, which is the wintertime. And that I was not going to commit to something that couldn't be fulfilled as they had been promised in the past by the late Henry Coors. So we did agree upon $1,000 a month for 50 months, or until paid off if I chose to pay extra, and at 0% interest. Again, this is me still being very green and not realizing that this should have come before the board. And I thought I was doing right at that time.
Do you have a board for South Hills?
No, I'm sorry. I was referring to the PRC.
Oh, okay.
I should have clarified. I apologize.
Do you have a copy that's actually signed by the law firm?
No, you have what I have.
Okay. Have you been making the payments on this?
Yes, I have.
Do you know how much is left owed on it?
34,000, I believe.
And you read Mr. Martinez's testimony with regard to this issue?
Yeah.
And basically, Mr. Martinez has indicated his opinion that here yet again is another financing document that obligates the company that was not both exhibit. I don't know that he discusses exhibit. Well, he does say exhibit I. But he's referencing exhibit H. And that he believes that a separate docket with regard to the contract be opened. What's your opinion on that testimony and or the agreements?
I agree that it needs to be further explored.
Do you think that we need to delay this case any longer to consider this, or do you believe perhaps it might be appropriate to deal with this in a separate case?
I believe it would be appropriate to deal with it in a separate case.
As far as the rates, rules, and forms that you have filed along with your direct testimony, other than separating the sewer utility from the water utility and making the corrections necessary to accomplish that, were there any other changes that you made?
No.
It is my understanding that during the pendency of this case, you have moved and no longer live in the area that South Hills serves. Is that correct?
That is correct.
But your testimony beginning at page 3, you've indicated all of your duties and the personnel that you have hired to all of your duties that you do to maintain service on a daily basis, as well as the personnel that you've hired here on site. Correct?
That is correct.
Have there been any changes since you filed the testimony?
No, there has not.
I note that on page 4 of your direct testimony, well, as I'm finding page 4, well, actually, it's past that, so let me go back. Okay, so there's page 4 of your direct testimony, and you're talking about the successful efforts and practices that you put in place to reduce your uncollectibles from a 40 or 50% down to a 15 or 18% part. And I'm wondering, do you have any idea what the, in business or in the utility business or specific to water utility business, what the average collectible or uncollectible is?
I do not.
But it appears to be pretty significant as far as South Hills is concerned, to go from a 40 or 50% to a 15 to 18%. Correct?
Yes, and this last month was even lower. We hit 10%.
And to what do you attribute your success? Your developing expertise, your calm demeanor, what?
Treating the customers the way they should be treated makes them more willing to pay their bill if they feel like someone cares and listens. I've also expanded their payment options. Many people in today's world use electronics for many things, including paying their bills. And that is something that I have added, not only Venmo, but we have now started taking credit cards and debit cards through Square. And it is very well appreciated within at least the South Hills water community.
Did you get any pushback when you eliminated cash payments?
A little bit, but within 3 or 4 months, I had Venmo up and running, and I explained to people it's not safe with cash. It's also a he said, she said. If they were to just drop cash in my mailbox, which they would do, if I wasn't home, to handwrite them a receipt, and it just wasn't good practice. It also was not a safe practice. So by eliminating that, I gave them an even nicer option. They didn't even have to leave their home to pay their bill.
Very well. I note on the next page 5, you indicate that there's approximately 200 water customers.
That is correct.
Is that actual 200 meters?
That is correct.
Okay, and 60 sewer customers, correct?
Yes.
And is there an opportunity for growth?
No.
Okay, so the particular area that you serve has already been built out?
Correct.
One of the other issues that you go on to discuss, which is relates to both the water and sewer functions, has to do with water rights.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you begin there on page 8 of your direct testimony, talking about a quitclaim deed, which is Exhibit E to your application. And There's been some discussion, I believe in the testimony that there's a question about whether or not South Hills actually owns any water rights. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I guess the shorthand version is such that South Hills is getting water potentially from the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District Authority. Is that correct?
correct.
Does this cause you any concern?
Yes,
And that depending on a determination from them, that South Hills might be without water.
and I know that that is a possibility, and I am starting to explore options for a backup for the customers. I was briefly approached that they are putting another water line down Coors Boulevard. And I was asked if I wanted to, at some point, come up with an agreement that if I ever needed a backup water source, that they would be willing to talk with me. And that was by one of the engineers that was out working on the site.
Engineers for who?
The Water Authority. So I utilized my resources and called Mr. Martinez to figure out where I should even start. And I responded back to this gentleman and said that I would be interested in exploring options to have a backup plan in place. I am a planner, and that is always a very important thing to have. He stated he was just gathering my information for them, and if they were interested in going farther, that they would be in contact with me. And that has not happened as of yet.
Have you thought about potentially in your testimony on page 9, you talk about the state engineer's office and documentation there. Have you pursued any changes in ownership?
No, I have not.
Okay. I know in the particular agreement that we have already you've already discussed, it indicated in there that you could and should potentially seek legal counsel with regard to that document. Have you done so with regard to any of the issues?
I have not yet. And
Go ahead.
part of my hesitation was getting this far first, and and trying to get things right and in the correct way, and then taking the next step. I do have intentions of contacting the state engineer's office and asking, letting them know we've been to this step, and asking them, in their opinion, what do I need to do, and to do it the correct way.
I note on your testimony with regard, you begin to talk about revenue, expenses, and cash flow.
Yes.
And beginning on page 14, so do you make any payment to the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy for the water?
Oh, yes. Well, no, we pay the Bernalillo County Water Authority, but not to the Middle Rio Grande.
But is it the Bernalillo County Water Authority? Am I misspeaking when I say it's the Middle Rio Grande? It has the water rights. I thought you were dealing with the Bernalillo County Water Authority with regard to the sewer service.
That is correct.
Okay. Right, and I guess for clarity of the record, I just want to clarify that it is the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District that applied for the point of diversion to for the irrigation water right for that Rio Grande 25500 and RG Rio Grande 2550 supplemental. for the subdivision, correct? Correct, Ms. Januszynski?
Yes,
Okay. So one is the water right, the other is the city of Albuquerque treatment of the sewer
correct.
effluent. Okay. Okay, let me just quickly look through here and see if I had, yeah, I was continuing on page 15 of your testimony. And you say upon completion of your case, of your work in this case, okay, that's when you're going to file the annual reports. And it says additionally, I will procure an automated accounting software system to be timely in my reporting and assist me in the management of the future. Have you estimated what that's going to cost?
The Sage 50C program, which is what Elizabeth Johns is guiding me towards, is going to be approximately $350 for the first year, and then around $200 a year thereafter.
Okay, so it's potentially then an expense that the company can absorb.
Yes.
So we didn't talk about that at all, but bills are being paid.
That
The
is
company's not in the red right now.
No, ma'am, just those two that we've discussed.
Just those two outstanding obligations,
That is correct.
potentially. Okay,
Yes.
okay. So you're being able to maintain, how long has it been since the company had a rate increase?
5 to 7 years, I believe. It's been a while.
Okay,
And that's something that will be explored further with Ms. Dejanot's guidance. Again, after we get things settled
okay.
the correct way with what we have.
One thing at a time, okay?
And then
All
by
right,
doing that would allow us to have the funds for updates and upgrades that need to happen with an older system.
okay. So just so it's clear in the record, at one particular point in the early paperwork in the application, you in fact did agree to purchase South Hills, correct?
I did.
And you granted a security interest in the stock as a pledge, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but then at some point in time during the pendency of the application, you were no longer pursuing a purchase, and basically Mr. Kors just transferred the stock to you.
That is correct.
Okay, for for no money changed hands.
That is correct.
All right, Ms. Junichinsky, Mr. Borman, any recross for you?
No, ma'am, staff has no further questions.
Okay. Ms. Junichinsky, anything else that you would like to tell the commission that you haven't already told us orally or through your written exhibits?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, very well. You are excused then as a witness. And we are going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back with the presentation of staff's witnesses. And what will happen once Mr. Borman has offered those exhibits, you'll get a chance to ask any questions of the witness. Okay,
Thank you.
very well. All right, let's take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back with the presentation of staff's case. Okay. How we doing, Allison?
Ready to go.
Awesome. Are we clear? We're not talking over each other. We're acting pretty good today.
Very good.
Oh, excellent. Okay, Mr. Borman, I believe staff has some witnesses.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Staff would like to call the first of its witnesses, Gabriella Dashino.
Ms. Deschanel, would you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Dashino.
Good morning.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
The New Mexico Public Regulation Commission is the bureau chief in the accounting bureau of the utility division.
As part of your duties in that position, did you review the application by South Hills Water Company, along with testimony and other documents that the company has filed in this case?
Yes,
And based upon that review, did you prepare or participate in preparing testimony regarding that application?
yes, I did.
Now, you should have 3 documents, I guess. Exhibits, staff exhibits 1, 2, and 3. Do you have those documents?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you identify what staff exhibit 1 is?
Yes, it's my prepared direct testimony filed on May 30th, 2019.
And was that testimony prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And understanding that you've filed subsequent testimony in this case, are those answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Do you adopt staff exhibit 1 as part of your sworn testimony in this matter?
Yes.
Madam Hearing Examiner, I wish to move admission of staff exhibit 1.
Ms. Dashino, didn't you in fact file a errata notice to that direct testimony?
Yes.
And that would be staff exhibit 2, actually. I was planning to admit that.
Okay. So the errata that you filed in staff's purported exhibit 2 changes line 17 of page 6 of your pre-filed direct testimony?
That's correct.
Okay, so were there any other additions, corrections, or deletions to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No.
Okay. With that clarification, Ms. Janichinski, do you have any objection to admitting staff exhibit 1, Ms. Dashino's direct testimony?
I do not.
Staff exhibit 1 will be admitted. Mr. Boardman?
Thank you. Ms. Dashino, the hearing examiner had a brief discussion with you about the notice of errata that staff filed regarding your direct testimony. Do you have staff exhibit 2?
Yes, I do.
And what is staff exhibit 2?
That is my notice of errata that was filed on June 5th, 2019.
And that notice of errata includes an affidavit submitted by you in this matter?
Correct.
Okay, and as you discussed with the hearing examiner, that affidavit changes, I guess, a particular number in your testimony as you described to the hearing examiner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, is this affidavit true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, it is.
Do you adopt staff exhibit 2 as a part of your sworn testimony in this matter?
Yes, I do.
Okay, at this time, I would move admission of staff at exhibit 2.
Ms. Janichinski, any objection to what's been identified as staff exhibit 2?
No, thank you.
Very well, staff admitted exhibit 2 is admitted.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Dashino, do you have staff exhibit 3?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and can you identify what staff exhibit 3 is?
Yes, that is my supplemental testimony filed on March 25th, 2022.
Okay, was staff exhibit 3 prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Okay, do you have any changes or corrections to staff exhibit 3?
I do not.
Okay, are those answers true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes, they are.
Now, some of the testimony in staff exhibit 3 is inconsistent with some of the testimony that you previously provided. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a change in my recommendation.
Okay. And to the extent that those matters are inconsistent between the 2 testimonies, can you tell me which of those testimonies you think should supersede the other?
It would be my supplemental testimony.
Okay, so that the testimony that you filed on March 25th of this year should overrule any inconsistencies in earlier testimonies?
That would be correct.
Okay. Do you adopt staff exhibit 3 as your sworn testimony in this matter?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. At this time, I move admission of staff exhibit 3.
Ms. Janichinski, any objection to what's been identified as staff exhibit 3, Ms. Dashino's supplemental testimony?
No, thank you.
Excuse me. And do you understand, Ms. Janichinski, that to the extent Ms. Dashino's supplemental testimony corrects, changes, or supersedes her direct testimony, it would be her supplemental testimony that she wishes the commission to consider?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very well. Staff Exhibit 3 is admitted. Mr. Borman?
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. I have no further questions for Ms. Dashino. She is available for examination by Ms. Janichinsky and yourself.
Thank you. Ms. Janichinsky, do you have questions for Ms. Dashino with regard to her testimony as provided in Staff Exhibits 1, 2, and 3?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Dashino.
Morning.
You heard my recitation into the record with regard to the procedural posture of this case, significantly beginning on August 15th of 2015. Did you?
Yes.
Do you agree procedurally with that recitation on the status conferences and the meetings between staff and Ms. Janichinsky?
Yes.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It has.
Do you believe if we had tried to go forward in the summer of 2019, that we would have reached the same result as potentially where we are now?
I don't believe so. There was many changes that have occurred since that time.
Do you consider them positive changes?
Absolutely.
What do you think would happen to the customers and ratepayers of South Hills if the commission does not approve the stock transfer?
Honestly, I do not know. Based on these proceedings, there has never been any transfer of ownership to Jory, yet somehow she's hung in here the past 2.5 years and done a tremendous job of keeping these customers with service.
Is staff aware of anyone else that has purported to want to assume the operation of this utility?
I know of no one else that's wanted to assume these responsibilities.
Do you know of anyone other than Jory that has attempted to claim ownership of any of the assets of South Hills?
No, I do not.
Do you know?
No, I do not.
Excuse me a second. I'm gonna throw my iPhone. Not the commission's, my personal one. Here's the commission's, it's fine. Okay. So I guess suffice it to say that originally you were not recommending the transfer, correct?
Initially, it was considered a sale, and I was definitely not recommending a sale.
And part of that had to do with some of the attributions for value as compared to what you thought was the actual evidence of value or lack of evidence of value. Is that correct?
Is correct.
Okay, but that's changed, right?
Yes, it has.
And so now what we're looking at is the transfer of the stock. But it's actually more than the transfer of the stock, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean, this is actually, in essence, transferring the CCN to Ms. Janiczenski, correct?
that would be correct. And Mr. Martinez addresses that more so than I do.
And how, in looking at both the transfer, which Ms. Janiczenski has testified, there's not any money changing hands, correct?
That's correct.
And so in looking at the transfer of control and transfer of the stock and basically transferring the CCN to her, how does any type of valuation play into this?
Well, as best I can discern, I think I elaborated in my supplemental testimony what was provided to us originally when this case was filed. There was the monetary value of around $99,000 that I came up with. And if that was being considered and if that was the actual true amount, then I would say that would be the monetary value. However, if this transfer occurs, I believe that Jory will come in and work on revaluing the assets of the company.
Well, I mean, is evaluation for the company, do you believe it's necessary? Do I need to make that finding?
Well, I think in the time when we were offering up a sale, it was, but since it's no longer a sale, I don't believe that you would have to.
But it's true, isn't it, that one of the big differences between the valuation that you had attributed to the company and what purportedly had been included, at least by Mr. Coors in his 2018 annual report, where he valued the company at over $500,000. The majority of that has to do with whether or not it actually owns any water rights, doesn't it?
That's correct.
And I believe, are you familiar that that issue I don't believe that staff has alleged that issue has to be decided in this case either, has it?
No.
In your supplemental testimony, you indicate on page 4 that you don't have any concerns with the day-to-day financial operation of South Hills. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And as far as you know, that the information then that Ms. Janiczenski has, I mean, even though that she hasn't filed the 2020 and 2021 reports, your communications with her indicate that that the company is paying its bills timely and paying its employee salaries and et cetera?
Yes, I have no reason to believe that what has been put forth by her is incorrect.
And you conclude in page 6 and 7 of your testimony that you no longer have concerns regarding the financial stability of South Hills. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think that's all the questions that I have for you. Mr. Borman?
I have no redirect for Ms. Dashino.
Ms. Janichinski, any question for Ms. Dashino?
No, thank you.
Ms. Dashino, before you're excused, it appears that based upon the testimony of the witness and your testimony regarding the interaction of the witness, that you've expended a significant amount of time in assisting Ms. Janichinski, and for that, let me thank you.
Thank you.
It appears that staff's work in this case has benefited the utility, and that potentially, while this case has been delayed for a significant amount of time, due to a lot of different reasons, that the time has actually also benefited South Hills, Ms. Janichinski, and the 200 people that receive water service by being able to work out a resolution that might not otherwise had occurred. So thank you, and you're excused, Ms. Dashino.
Thank you.
Mr. Borman, you have another witness.
I do have another witness. Staff calls Timothy A. Martinez.
Mr. Martinez, would you raise your right hand, sir? And unmute, please. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good. I guess it's still good morning, Mr. Martinez.
Yes, good morning.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am employed by the New Mexico Public Regulation Utility Division, and I am in the Gas, Water, and Wastewater Engineering Bureau as an engineer.
As part of your duties in that position, did you review the application by South Hills Water Company in this case, along with the testimony and other documentation they've submitted into the record?
Yes,
And based upon that review, did you prepare or participate in preparing testimony regarding that application?
yes, I did. I prepared direct testimony and supplemental direct testimony.
Okay, and those documents are identified as staff exhibits 4 and 5, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do you have staff exhibit 4 available to you?
I do. I have it in front of me.
And can you specifically identify that document?
Staff Exhibit 4 is my direct testimony filed on May 30th of 2019.
And was staff exhibit 4 prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Oh, do you have changes or corrections to staff exhibit 4?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, as I asked Ms. Dashino, there are differences between the testimonies that you filed in May of 2019 and the testimonies you filed on March 25th of this year. Is that correct?
Yes, there are.
Okay, so outside of the differences in those testimonies, are the answers to the questions set forth in Staff Exhibit 4 true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
They are.
Okay. Do you adopt Staff Exhibit 4 as your sworn testimony in this matter?
I do.
Okay, at this time, I move admission of Staff Exhibit 4.
Ms. Janichinski, any objection to what's been identified as Staff Exhibit 4? That was Mr. Martinez's original direct testimony.
No, thank you.
Hearing no objection, Staff Exhibit 4 is admitted.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Borman?
Thank you. And Mr. Martinez, you also have Staff Exhibit 5.
Yes.
Can you identify that document?
Yes. That is my supplemental direct testimony filed on March 25th, 2022.
Okay, do you have any changes or corrections to Staff Exhibit 5?
No, I don't.
And was Staff Exhibit 5 prepared by you or under your supervision?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and if I asked you today the same questions as are set forth in Staff Exhibit 5, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay, and as we briefly discussed a moment ago, there are some parts of Staff Exhibit 5 that contradict what you have indicated in Staff Exhibit 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You've basically changed positions on some issues. That's correct?
That is correct. My recommendations to the commission have changed from the direct testimony to the supplemental direct testimony. The major change being the recommendation that the commission approve the stock transfer. Whereas in my direct testimony, that was not my recommendation.
Okay, and to the extent that the recommendations in Staff Exhibit 5 conflict with any recommendations in Staff Exhibit 4, would you recommend that Staff Exhibit 5 recommendations should govern?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So then do you adopt Staff Exhibit 5 as your sworn testimony in this matter?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I move admission of Staff Exhibit 5.
Any objection to what's been identified as Staff Exhibit 5? Mr. Martinez, supplemental direct testimony filed in this case. Ms. Janichinski?
No, thank you.
And Ms. Janichinski, you understand that this supplemental direct testimony of Mr. Martinez potentially corrects, changes, or supersedes some of the testimony contained in his original direct testimony, and that in those instances, he's asking the commission to consider the supplemental direct testimony on those issues to be his position.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, very well. Hearing no objection, Staff Exhibit 5 is admitted into the record. Mr. Borman?
Thank you. Mr. Martinez is available for examination by Ms. Gnachinsky and yourself.
Very well. Thank you, sir. Ms. Janichinski, questions for Mr. Martinez?
No, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Martinez.
Good morning.
As I think you just indicated to Mr. Borman, in your original direct testimony, you actually recommended that the transfer not be approved by the commission. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what do you think would have happened to the system and or the customers of South Hills if Ms. Janichinski had not continued to operate South Hills?
I think the commission would have had a huge problem on their hands without having an operator to handle the administrative portion of running a utility, along with having a certified operator and staff that to maintain the utility. The utility would have been in a pretty bad spot. That's why I can put it. I think Ms. Janichinski, Ms. Jory, has provided that role, and she has done it adequately. What I envisioned for the commission, if it did not have Ms. Jory, was staff having to try to find a receiver or another utility to come in and try to operate this utility, at least on a short-term basis. As difficult as that may have been, that would have been the only option left, in my opinion.
And do you think that although it was a steep learning curve, according to the testimonies in this case, do you think that the optimal result has occurred?
I do believe so. Ms. Jory has done a really good job picking up the operation of the utility. I believe she has hired a knowledgeable staff, a qualified staff to assist her. I think she is learning the process. I think she's done more than some of our other utilities do. The mom and pops typically don't understand a lot of the regulatory process, and she has actively engaged in learning and bettering her knowledge as a potential utility investor-owned utility owner. I think there are still some areas where additional learning will take place. I think Mr. Coors has definitely left some issues that need to be resolved. And I do believe that Ms. Jory will take on those tasks and do a very good job at trying to address these issues and setting South Hills down a path as an efficient, well-run utility.
Do you have any concerns with regard to the water right issue at this point?
I do. I mean, the commission's rules say that there should be 2 sources of water for each utility. And I think this is an area where Jory needs to get some more certainty in the operation of the utility. And that's why I've recommended in my testimony that she go talk with the state engineer. I think as the regulatory body that oversees water rights, she needs to find out where she stands. I know there's district court proceedings that have given a pretty good idea of what the status is of those water rights. But I think it would benefit her to go and meet with the state engineer's office and get familiar with those folks and seek any guidance that they may be willing to provide to her. I also believe that it would be a good idea that she go and set up a meeting with the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District, at the very least to introduce herself, to let her know that she is the replacement for Mr. Coors, and to discuss the situation, recognizing what the district court has found and what this commission has also found, and trying to seek some sort of understanding, whether it be through a memorandum of understanding or some other agreement that ensures that she is able to continue to provide service using those water rights. I think having something on paper benefits her and her customers.
But it's not your position that has to occur prior to the commission deciding this case, is it?
No, it isn't. I think these are things that need to be done after the fact, after an order of this commission granting her permission to own and operate the utility. These are long-term issues that will be addressed, I believe, going forward. I am aware of the water line by the Water Authority. Ms. Jory and I had a discussion about that, and I advised her that it would be a good idea to look into that and to see what possibilities might arise from that water line passing basically along the street right in front of her utility. It would be another option to have a secondary source of water should anything happen with her current source of water.
And additionally, you had concern with regard to you probably heard this morning me asking Ms. Janichinski about the two liabilities that she had previously considered, those being the promissory note to Mr. Kaur's widow and the attorney installment payment liability.
Yes, I'm familiar with both of those.
And both of those you recommended not be paid, correct?
Yes, that was my recommendation. On the promissory note with Mrs. Kaur's, it appeared to me that was entered into not long after an order by the commission regarding a separate financing with Mr. Kaur's found that there were issues with his application for that financing. He essentially entered into that financing prior to getting commission approval. And it appears that was what was done in this case as well. There was no filing seeking permission of the financing with Mrs. Kaur's. And it was one of the frustrating things with Mr. Kaur's is he did things in an order that he thought was best for him. And it wasn't always in agreement with the commission's rules and regulations. So knowing that he had just come out of a financing case a year or two prior, and he entered into another financing case, essentially doing the same thing that he had just done in the previous case, I thought it was reasonable that customers not have to continue to pay that debt. It was another error on the part of Mr. Kaur's, and I thought it was fair that those payments should stop.
Well, in your testimony on page 11, you indicate that with regard to the promissory note, line 8, staff assumes that this amount was what was remaining from the approved $71,830 discussed from the case number 16-00331 UT. Correct?
That's correct.
So that 71,380 had been approved, correct?
It did. There were other monies that were disapproved, and I think a filing with the commission would have verified with a strong degree of certainty that the monies in the promissory note exhibit G were in fact the commission approved funds that were approved to be financed in that case in 16-331.
Because in essence, Mr. Martinez, isn't the claim made by the promissory note to Mrs. Kaur's that she paid off the remainder of the Bank of Albuquerque financing, which is the 71,830?
Yes, that's what it says in there in the promissory.
Do you have any reason to doubt that?
I'd like to
You
say
don't have any reason to believe it.
it was always difficult with Mr. Kaur's on what was the truth and what was stretching the truth. I'd like to believe that was that amount. but not having a case and not having evidence presented, it's hard to say with a high level of certainty that that is in fact the case. I'd like to believe that the intent of Mr. Coors was to have that 71,000 of approved financing paid off. But there's no way to know that for sure without having a filing before this commission.
Okay. And then, so then basically your recommendation is at this point that I believe you probably heard Ms. Ginachinsky testify earlier that there's approximately $7,000 still owed on that. Your recommendation is that South Hills not pay it,
Yes, that's
correct?
Yes, that's my recommendation.
And then that recommendation is based on the lack of proof and the lack that he failed to even come in to get the financing approved.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then with regard to this other liability that you've referred to as the Lewis liability, that's a contract for attorney services that you believe stemmed from something that the commission had already determined that South Hills shouldn't pay, correct?
That is correct. That was a finding in case 16-00331-UT.
Therefore, you would recommend that Ms. Ginachinsky stop paying this?
My recommendation was that she stop paying this, but be provided the opportunity to jointly file with the Lewis folks for approval of the contract. As it stands now, it's a contract that is addressing an issue that was dealt with previously at the commission, in which the commission found was not in the public interest. And I think they should be afforded an opportunity to present their case on how this is in the public interest. This agreement is in the public interest.
Okay. So then basically staff's recommendation is that this issue be addressed in another docket that is precipitated by whom?
It's my opinion that there should be a new docket opened by the commission to address this issue, this contract issue. And it should be something that is opened at the conclusion of this case.
Okay. So the staff's recommendation is that the commission find that Ms. Ginachinsky is the rightful owner, and then once an operator, and really, I mean, I believe you rightly testify as to 62, 612 and 13, but also, I mean, we have some 6295 in here too, don't you think?
I do. There is. It's something that I initially had in my testimony, and I should have left it in there. But there is some 6295.
I mean, it really is a CCN transfer, isn't it?
It is. I do agree with that.
Because I mean, even if even if she's considered to be even if the commission were to like retroactively, approve the stock transfer, in essence, she's not just the owner of the stock, but she is the company now, isn't she?
She is, and she would need the commission to approve the transfer of the CCN to her as well as the stock.
And under 6295, the commission has to consider the whether or not the present and future public convenience and necessity require the continuation of the service, don't they?
They do.
And it is your opinion that in this case, the 6295 standard has been fulfilled
It is my opinion that it has been fulfilled.
and that it would be in the public, in the interest of the public convenience and necessity that the CCN be transferred to Ms. Gina Chinsky. Correct?
That is correct.
In your supplemental testimony, just a little confused. I would recommend to staff that you change your header in your supplemental testimonies. So that it says supplemental direct testimony.
I see that. I apologize. That is something that should have been changed.
That's okay. It also happened in the last witness too. I didn't mention it, but I'm flipping between your testimony and your supplemental testimony, and I'm confusing myself, which some people might think that's very easy for me to do. But you indicate on page 14 of your supplemental testimony that you visited in I guess it's the summer of 2019 with Ms. Gina Chinsky, and you actually got to view the part of the system, utility system?
I did. I saw the pump house. I saw the storage facility. We drove through the subdivisions. So I saw fire hydrants. I think we even might have popped open a meter, if I remember correctly, to take a look at how those were set. And so I got a pretty good tour. Me and Ms. Dashino got a pretty good tour of the system.
So you feel pretty confident then. Did you meet with Mr. Hernandez?
No, I didn't. I did not meet with him. It was just Ms. Chinsky and Ms. Dashino and myself that were present that day.
But it is your understanding that he is the certified water operator?
Yes, and at one of the exhibits to Ms. Jory's testimony provides that certification proof.
Okay. And you go on page 15 of your testimony to state that it's your belief and understanding that they're in compliance with New Mexico Environment Department water quality rules and statutes, correct?
That is correct. I did go online to the Drinking Water Watch to check for violations or any violation orders that South Hills may have had, and I did not find anything that was a violation on their website.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted some clarification because you had indicated that you had gone to the website and it says it appears that when any issues do arise, they are addressed immediately. So I guess you didn't find any issues, did you?
No, there's not. There is no water quality issues. Occasionally the Environment Department will list on there the consumer confidence report if it isn't provided at the times that they dictate in their rules and statutes, they will list that on their Drinking Water Watch website. It's not a violation of any of their water standards. It's more informative to the public. And so there were some listings of the CCR on that Drinking Water Watch, and they were addressed.
Do you think that potentially Ms. Junichinsky might have had record keeping learning curve with regard to the Environment Department also?
I would imagine so. And I think that when she brought on Mr. Hernandez, I think that helped quite a bit. He had some experience with the working with the Environment Department. And so, you know, his being a certified operator, he is going to understand all the rules and regs of the Environment Department. And so he would be a good source for Ms. Jory and staying in compliance. And just teaching her, you know, what is expected from their rules and regs. And so I think it's been ongoing. I think she's definitely learning quite a bit.
And this SCADA system?
Yes, it's a monitoring system. It tells the operator if there is something wrong with the system itself. If a water pump is down or the chlorinator is low, it will send a message to the operator that, you know, here's a red flag, you need to come and address this issue immediately.
Do you know if that's something that all the small water have?
It's something they all should have. Now, I don't know that all of them do have. I think that was something that Henry did a while back, and it was very smart on his part to do that. You know, it allowed him to be able to monitor the system no matter where he was at. And, you know, it gave him some real-time information. And if anything needed to be addressed, he could address it. And I think that has continued on with Ms. Jory. She has real-time information of what the system is doing, how it is operating, and can address issues as they come up, as she's notified.
And you also indicated in your testimony on page 14 at lines 15 through 19 that Ms. Junichinsky has hired some additional part-time employees that perform water sampling, assist with emergency water shutoffs, assist with meter reading, payment collection and billing, and other office projects. Correct?
That's correct.
Do those hires and your understanding of what they do, along with Mr. Hernandez, do you feel that like that's the pretty complete package with regard to running a small water and sewer utility?
I do believe it's everything that she needs to safely operate this utility. Other small water utilities try to put all of those functions into one individual. It's usually the owner who takes on that responsibility. I think Ms. Jory has sought out qualified individuals who are performing these functions for her. And I think they're doing a good job.
Do you have any pause with the fact that Ms. Junichinsky has moved out of the district and is in fact out of state?
I don't. She's in contact with these folks. She's provided in testimony weekly, if not daily, and has also stated that she is able to come to New Mexico if needed. And so I believe she can address all of the concerns of the utility from her current location.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. That's all of the questions that I have for you. Mr. Borman, any redirect?
Madam Hearing Examiner, I don't have any redirect, but I would note that at least as counsel for staff, I'm not convinced that this qualifies as an abandonment of facilities under 6295. And to the extent that that issue was not addressed in Mr. Martinez's testimony, that would have been a decision by the lawyer, meaning me, to not
Okay,
was addressed. And so any issue regarding his not addressing that, the responsibility lays with me and not with him. I would state that, you know, though, although we, or at least although I believe as staff's lawyer that it's not an abandonment of facilities, to the extent that you or the commission feels otherwise or analyzes this and comes to a different conclusion, we do think that such abandonment should be granted in this case, such that Ms. Ginachinsky can take over or continue operating the South Hills facilities.
okay. Very well. Ms. Ginachinsky, any questions for Mr. Martinez?
No, thank you.
And additionally, Mr. Martinez, I also, based upon my knowledge of your protracted working with Ms. Ginachinsky over the past 2.5 years, I also want to thank you for staff's involvement in assisting Ms. Ginachinsky with information regarding the commission's procedures, and I'm sure practical advice based on your knowledge and experience in years of dealing with small water companies. Your help's appreciated. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I wish all of these utilities were like Ms. Jory, where they asked for staff's input and advice. You know, I think it would help all around. We have some water utilities where they don't do that. They often are distressed utilities. And I think if we had a role in advising some of these folks before they got to that distress point, I think it'd be better for all.
I totally agree with you, sir. Thank you, and you're excused.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Borman?
Staff has nothing further.
Very well. Ms. Ginachinsky, is there anything that you believe that your expert who assisted you in preparing your testimony needs to tell me?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, very well. With that then, thank you all. Thanks to you also, Mr. Borman, for helping Ms. Ginachinsky negotiate the commission processes and for continuing to provide those status reports over this period of time that we've been working on the case. Although my observation is not testimony, I do not believe that we could have gotten to this place and into having a utility with no complaints filed according to the testimony with the commission, and having utility that provides successful service would not have been in the same place 2.5 years ago. I don't believe. So I'm sure the customers have appreciated having their water and sewer during the pendency of this case. Based upon the information contained in the record in this case, I will issue a recommended decision that recommends that the stock transfer to Ms. Janichinski be approved. I haven't totally decided how I think it's appropriate to deal with the outstanding issues brought up regarding the liabilities, whether or not that should be a commission initiated proceeding or an applicant initiated proceeding. So I'll continue to think about that. But I will issue my recommended decision in writing. And as I've explained to you, Ms. Janichinski, after I've issued my my recommended decision in writing, you may file exceptions if you think that something that I've determined is factually or legally inappropriate. And then ultimately the recommended decision and any exceptions will be decided by the commission. So if there's not any further questions, Allison, thank you so much for being here to take our proceeding, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for
Thank you.
everything you've done.